On to the latest COVID-19 situation around the world, starting with the UK. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Monday ordered Britons to stay at home as part of their new lockdown measures. Now, this comes after advice to stay at home and avoid social gatherings when unheeded by millions during the weekend. In a televised address to the nation, Mr. Johnson said the British people were only allowed to leave their homes for basic necessities. He added that the police will be enforcing these new rules through fines and dispersing gatherings. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization warned that the coronavirus pandemic is clearly accelerating, but it was still possible to change the course of the outbreak. They called for the use of more aggressive and targeted tactics, emphasizing that we are not helpless bystanders. Italy has banned travel within the country in yet another attempt to slow the virus spread. This comes after the country reported 651 more deaths on Sunday. The total death toll in Italy is now over 6,000, with close to 64,000 infected cases. The Health Commission for China's Hubei province said it will remove all travel restrictions in and out of Hubei on March 25th. This is excepting the city of Wuhan, where travel restrictions will be lifted on April 8th. And just across the causeway, Malaysia will likely see an extension of its ongoing movement curbs. The decision, to be made by next Monday, will be based on whether there is a reduction in infection cases. The government will also unveil a second stimulus package following last month's 20 billion ringgit injection. The country saw its biggest daily increase with 212 new infections yesterday. This brings the number of those infected to over 1,514 deaths. I'm now joined by Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teoh. Now, Shannon, what is the likelihood of an extension of the movement curbs?
I'd say the likelihood is pretty high. I mean, Prime Minister Muhyiddin said that if the numbers are decreasing, then maybe they will consider it. But as long as they're increasing, then they would look at an extension. I mean, the guidance that is given by him, most people are taking the message that we're going to look at the RMO extending until April now. How long? He indicated that they would decide on whether 1 week more or 2 weeks more, but many experts are saying you need at least a month or two before you can contain the entire epidemic that is happening in Malaysia.
Now, Shannon, in the event, say, it were to be extended, what would it entail? Would the government, say, impose stricter rules?
Right now, the government's been saying Malaysians are not complying to the RMO enough. They've started off at 60% compliance. Now they're saying it's about 90%. Well, the army's rolled out, so maybe people are complying a bit more. But what it would entail would be, well, as we mentioned, the situation will continue. Borders will continue to be closed. Non-essential businesses will still be shut down. And moreover, they're starting to talk about certain hotspots, places which have a lot of cases. I think they're defining it as districts with more than 40 cases. They might come under more scrutiny, more roadblocks, more security measures, trying to make sure that in those areas where there's been a lot of infections, that there's a lot less human contact. So we might see stricter measures, but I don't think we're at a stage where we might see the same kind of lockdowns you've seen in China.
Right. Now, Shannon, let's talk about, say, the impact that this extension would, affect. And what sort of economic impact would Malaysia and the people see if the extension happens?
Well, even right now, we are seeing that people are losing income. We just got some statistics from the Social Security Department. They are seeing even higher claimants for employment insurance than last year, and the trajectory we're getting at for March, they're looking at 80% more claims than last year. So people are losing jobs, right? People don't have sources of income, but in a sense, because businesses are closed, they can't operate. Economic time in Malaysia has paused, right? But financial time, the bills keep racking up. Your rents, your loans, stuff like that, the bills still need to get paid. So Malaysians are finding that money is coming out of our pockets, but nothing's coming back in. So there's a segment of the population that is really struggling, and for them to last another 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, nobody knows how long this is going to go for. They're really going to struggle to put food on the tables.
Yeah. Now, Shannon, of course, we see this impact on the Malaysians in Malaysia. Now, let's focus on the Malaysians who are working in Singapore. if there is an extension on it, do you reckon that these people will be affected as well? And if so, how?
Well, I think the agreement between the two governments, now I don't know the fine print, but it's that the workers will be allowed to stay in Singapore and continue to work for their employers if they don't come back. So if this RMO is extended, my sense is that they will be allowed to continue living there. Now, whether their employers or whoever's providing them with lodgings can continue to do so is a question that remains to be answered. But clearly what we know is that before they return, they need to be given a clean bill of health. They have to be scanned, coronavirus and all that stuff. So whether they have to be sent back halfway or they stay on for the full term, that's unclear. But clearly, if they've caught something while they're in Singapore, they won't be allowed back.
Yeah. And Shannon, on to measures now. What are some of the measures, that have the government put in place to help the country and the people?
So we talked about the 20 billion stimulus package that was in place before. Now that came in before the current restrictions, and that was largely targeted at the tourism industry. So that 20 billion was mainly geared towards keeping the economy afloat, trying to soften the impact of the global outbreak. But with the situation in Malaysia now, it's basically become about people. The criticism of the government, it's done two interim measures so far, is that the measures seem to still be geared towards making sure that the economy is good, and also towards making sure that the government's own balance sheet is fine. But the criticism is that it's not going to the people who need it the most. I'll give you an example. Last week, the government announced that it would be subsidizing electricity by the tune of 500 million ringgit. But 80% of electricity used in Malaysia is by businesses, not individual households. So 400 million out of this 500 million is going to firms, is going to businesses, right? And they're large, and usually it's going to go to large-scale businesses. That's the one that's using a lot of electricity. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced that Malaysians will be able to draw on their EPF, which is similar to Singapore's CPF, up to 500 ringgit a month for the next 12 months. That's 6,000 ringgit per worker. And this is going to be available to 12 million workers who have this money in their EPF accounts. And it's going to result in 40 billion ringgit going in of liquidity going into the market. But again, the criticism, A, it's actually taking away from retirement funds, and B, not everyone has this money to withdraw. It's going to be largely the middle class and the wealthy who have this money to withdraw. So still, what happens to the poorer people? Are estimating about 4 million who don't have this EPF funds to draw on. 4 million is also about the number of freelancers in the market who have completely lost their income during these 2 weeks because they have no way to actually service their clients or do whatever it is that they do in the gig economy. So the government measures are still missing out on this big chunk of people. And that's what we are hoping for the government to address next week when it launches a full comprehensive stimulus package. But that remains to be seen. The government is now taking suggestions from the public. I understand the window closes tomorrow on the wish list, as it were. Until Monday, we have to hope for the best.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shannon, for your insight. Certainly, it remains to be seen what will be announced this coming Monday. And that was Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teoh on whether the extension of the movement curbs is likely to happen in Malaysia. Now, rounding up.